Since the beginning of time, human beings have been using nature to improve the standard of living and influence of traditional beliefs. We will now look at the art of bark cloth. Bark cloth is a versatile material that was once common in Asia, Africa, and the Pacific. Bark cloth comes primarily from trees of the family Moraceae, including Brucinicia papyrifera, Artocarpus altilis, Artocarpus tamarin, and Ficus natalensis. It is made by beating wooden strips of the fibrous inner bark of these trees into sheets, which are then finished into a variety of items. Many texts that mention paper clothing are actually referring to bark cloth. Some modern cotton-based fabrics are also named bark cloth for their resemblance to these traditional fabrics. We will look at kapa, which is the Hawaiian version of bark cloth, and the method used, as well as the significance of the patterns painted on the bark cloth. Bark cloth making is an ancient craft of the Buganda people who live in the Buganda Kingdom in southern Uganda. Traditionally, craftsmen of the New Gongi clan, headed by a Kababgaza, the hereditary chief draftsman, have been manufacturing bark cloth for the Buganda royal family and the rest of the community. Bark cloth is still recognized among the Buganda community as a marker of specific social and cultural traditions. The production of bark cloth was widespread, with workshops in almost every village in the Buganda Kingdom, a prehistoric technique that predates the invention of weaving. The inner bark of the mokuba tree is harvested during the wet season, and then in a long and strenuous process beaten with different types of wooden mallet to give it a soft and fine texture and an even terracotta color. The preparation of bark cloth. The preparation of bark cloth is one of humanity's oldest skills. The tree is first stripped of its bark. This process is done as carefully as possible to reduce the amount of tears in the bark sample. It is important to avoid any knobs of the tree and to strip the bark as big as possible to save time and reduce work in the following stages of the bark cloth production. Okuembura is then done with banana leaves to protect the mutumba tree from the direct sunlight, which would affect the tree's next harvest. Carefully stripping the bark also creates a better finish in the finished product. Once a working space has been set up, the stripped piece of bark is cleaned of any remaining lichens that may interfere with quality of the finished product. The raw bark is carefully rolled to be transported to the place where the next stage of processing will begin.
Tufumba olubugo olwo lwa nsonga bbiri nga ssatu. Ensonga esooka nti olubugo olufumbe tuba lwa mutindo ennyo okusinga olutali lufumbe. Ensonga ey'okubiri, bwe tulufumba lweyongera okugonda. Ensonga endala ey'okusatu, tuggyamu amasanda. Kati omukozi bw'aba akola, ne bw'oba oli mu lugoye lwo nga lweru, osigala nga bw'obadde mu bati mukyali masanda, so nga amasanda ago gasigala nga gakwati.
Then boiled in order to make it of a high quality compared to some that don't go through the same process. It is also said that this also tends to eliminate the gum known as a masanda.
Baganywa bagamba gayamba gajjanjaba ulcers, mabwa g'olubuto n'emukukolola n'abantu ng'omuntu abadde akola. Era bwe twalina Dr. Nambatya ng'anoonyereza yo ku ddagala lye yajjamu ku ddagala ly'okukolola, n'ajjamu eddagala ly'ebiwundu, n'ajjamu n'akantu akafumu eddagala lyaffe eriyamba ku basajja ng'omaze okumala okwema after shavers, nga buli lw'oyisaako tobutukabutuka ng'abijja mu mazzi ago. Era yatusuubiza nti akyayongera okunoonyereza ku mazzi ago, naye ng'ate ne mu nzijanjaba eyaffe ey'edda, abedda omwana bwe yabanga alumwa ogwoka nga maama agaayo obukola bw'omutuba n'amuvumbula omwana nga aluma omugwoka era n'omuntu yabanga alumizibwa mu lubuto omuntu aluma enjoma nga tigaayo ebikola by'omutuba kitegeeza nti amasanda gano gonna gaba gakuŋŋaanidde galabika ekirala olubugo teruyitwamu nsiri naye nga bagamba nti ekimu si nsiri butasobola kulisaamu omumwa naye olubugo olwo lwennyini akawowo akavaamu n'embeera yaalwo egoba ki egoba ensiri okulaba nga abantu bagamba nti abo oba ogira weeteekeko olubugo ensiri tizikuluma naye nga bagamba nti tekoma kulemererwa kuyisaamu omumwa naye n'okuzigoba kwennyini ekyo nyabyo ekimu kuli.
This is done by hammering it with a wooden indigenous tool called a bark beater until all the bark is removed and only fibers remain. In the end it is harder to tear, more flexible and more durable. Once the fibers are flattened and hard enough, the final step is to lay the fibers out to dry. Once the fibers have dried, it is ready to be sold locally or exported for the secondary process where the cloth will be turned into bark cloth-made products. Ways bark cloth is worn traditionally. Bark cloth is worn like a toga by both sexes. Women place a sash around the waist, while common bark cloth is terracotta in color. Bark cloth of kings and chiefs is dyed white or black and worn in a different style to underline their status. The cloth is mainly worn at coronation, healing ceremonies, funerals, and cultural gathering, but is also used for curtains, mosquito nets, and bedding. Before the development of woven textiles, bark cloth was made in Polynesia for thousands of years. In Hawaii, this practice is known as hana kapa. Hana, meaning make, and kapa, meaning bark cloth. Some walk patch, paper mulberry tree, is chopped. When the walk patch is done being trimmed, it is then carried back to the working area where it will now go through the process of becoming bark cloth. Opihai shells will be used as a very important tool. It will be used to scrap the top layer of the bark off. Once the top layer of bark is off, Niho Oki, a sharp tooth knife, will be used as a sharp tool to cut the inner layer of bark. pihai shell will be used yet again to remove the bark that is needed to make bark cloth. Once the bark is removed, it is placed on a rock where it will be beaten by a ho-how round beater. Now the bark is beaten, it is then rolled up and put into water to soak. After it has soaked for some time, it is taken out the water and placed on a wood to be beaten again with a lekuku square beater this time. This bark cloth is a whitish in color, unlike the bark cloth in Uganda, which is terracotta in color. It is then hung up to dry. The cloth is rubbed down with a smooth shell. The cloth will now be given some pattern design. Wooden sticks with a flat side that has a pattern carved into it is dipped in natural dye to make the pattern on the bark cloth.
My name is Kanani, and what we have here is kapa. Kapa is the clothing and the linens of Hawaii. It was the women's job to make all the clothing for everybody. It was made from the inner bark of a native tree to Hawaii, which we call vauke. We would only use the inner bark to make for a softer piece of cloth, but we would soak the bark in water for a few days, pound it out with our ie kukus on our kua here until it became thin like clothing. And then we're able to dye it all different colors of the rainbow by using roots and berries, flowers, pretty much anything with color. Today we have some printed with olena, which is a Hawaiian root native to Hawaii. We would grab our ohekapala, which is a stamp that we carve out of bamboo, and we'd have our hala brush. The hala comes from a tree that it's like the fruit of the tree, but it would all break apart and dry out, and we'd paint it on with our dye. And just by pressing it onto the paper or our kapa, it would leave a beautiful mark. And we were able to put all different designs on them, which eventually could help tell a story because we did not have a written language. Everything was passed down through the chants, the hulas, and our dances. And by printing onto the clothing, that was another way for the women to pass down their stories.
Bark cloth today.
A fabric that has survived wars, colonialism, and global trade, bark cloth has served as a connecting thread between the past and present generations. Today, bark cloth has both potential for both artistic expressions and industrial mass production of items for economic ventures not only in Uganda but globally. The knowledge and skillful of bark cloth production continues to be handed down to the young generation through the informal education, with a new wave of contemporary fashion turning bark cloth into clothes, shoes, bags, and beautiful art pieces.
Thank you for watching. For more videos like this, follow CIKS.